All right, I think let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, AI in Guidelines and Evidence Synthesis. My name is Shelby. I'm the Digital Marketing Lead here at Evidence Prime and will be hosting today's webinar. Evidence Prime is the company behind GradePro, a guideline development tool, and Laser AI, a software review tool. Moving on to the inspiration for today's webinar, the Global Evidence Summit. The summit was a really jam-packed event with many thought-provoking discussions, and the Evidence Prime team was thrilled not only to attend, but to also have a booth at the summit and to participate in multiple workshops and sessions. It's not every day that we are able to have face-to-face discussions with, experts, colleagues, and peers in the industry. But events like this truly do help us and inspire those conversations that we might not have otherwise have had the chance to have. The aim of the Global Evidence Summit really is a great description of the event itself. And this is taken from their website. The Global Evidence Summit's aim is to provide a multidisciplinary and cross-cultural platform which provides the opportunity for delegates and speakers to exchange ideas about how to best produce, summarize, and disseminate evidence to inform policy and practice, and then using that evidence to improve people's lives across the world. Later, one of the themes mentioned for the summit is about evidence accessibility, hence our webinar today. As with many industry events like this, not everyone can attend, but the conversations don't always start or end there. We wanted to take this moment to share our insights from the Global Evidence Summit with those who couldn't attend, as well as the highlights, and then make them accessible to further the conversations in this space because they're vital. And then without further ado, our two speakers today, Artur Nowak and Igancio Neumann, who both participated at the summit. Dr. Neumann will be speaking about Grade and the AI companion for the Grade book, which is designed to help users engage with Grade content interactively, while Artur will be speaking about the insights from the summit and the AI debate of whether AI can replace humans in evidence synthesis. After each presentation, we'll have a short Q&A session where we will ask your questions, if there are enough in the Q&A, before moving on to the next presentation. At the end, we've planned an AI in Guidelines evidence synthesis discussion based off of some of the important questions in the industry right now, and then, of course, any more questions that you might have. First, I'm going to call up Ignacio to present first. I'd like to really thank you for being with us today. We're all looking forward to what you have to say with Grade, and please go ahead, take us away, and just do a short intro of yourself there. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby, very much. I'm very glad to be here. Shelby said we had the opportunity to meet with colleagues in Prague, and it was very interesting how the Guideline enterprise is moving forward and how technology is an essential part of this progress. So what I wanted to talk and present to you is about the use of the Grade approach. Grade is one of, I think, the leading methodology in guideline development, and Grade has been going on for quite a while. It started in the early 2000s, then the first iteration of the Grade handbook was published in 2013, but progress did not stop there. There were continuous methodological improvements, and we felt a couple of years ago that we needed an updated version of the Grade handbook. And I'm going to share my screen. So we are in the process of, hope you see my screen. We're in the process of updating the Grade handbook, and we call it the Grade book. It's a great book, like for romantic reasons, but it's mostly a web page, and we would like to be the getaway from all Grade resources. This is where you can find the most updated information. You see in the web address is book.gradepro.org. This will be a living publication. We are uploading chapters, but we expect to be this finished by 2026. So if you go to some of the chapter, you will be, for example, you will get and how the new chapter look like. We want to include more features in the future, but if the chapter has not been published yet, you will be linked to the previous iteration of the Greyhound. So this previous iteration will be replaced in time, and we expect a year or a year and a half from now will be completely replaced. However, we feel that sometimes reading through a book or through a website may not be the best way to interact with the content, especially if there is a lot of content to cover. So we are in the process of developing different ways to do it, interactive way. So if you go more info, one of the is the great GPT, which is the AI companion. And this is what I want to talk about here today. So this is great GPT, and we're still in the progress of training this GPT. It's based on the large language model technology. This has the book integrated in the training, but we need to kind of identify the most frequent question and train the model with those questions as well. But for example, in this case, we only this is only working now with assessment of the certainty of the evidence. For example, say you may be interested in doing a systematic review or a guideline, and you may say, well, I need to do a grade table, a summary and finding table. And so I need help assessing this risk of bias or the study limitation of the study. So for example, let's take that. So supposedly GDT will search the knowledge and will help you to provide practical steps. This is what we envision. So well, practical step, the step one will be determine the number of thresholds you're going to use. Thresholds are something very important now in grade. Then determine the target of the certainty rating, evaluate the evidence, and give you some idea what you need to do. For example, compare if you want to assess risk of bias, you need to compare trials with low risk of bias and high risk of bias, and assess whether these may change the results, and then decide whether rating down is appropriate. And it's kind of give you step by step and help you to navigate the grade content in a conversational way. Or you may have question about, okay, well, another of the grade domain is imprecision. So what is imprecision? And you can type here using natural language, and the GPT will give you a definition and some general ways to do it, or to evaluate imprecision based on the grade book. So I think it's very, very interesting. It also gives you the assessment process, give you an example, give you also consideration about the line effect. And we have trained the model based on the latest iteration of the grade content. So I think that the good about thing, what is this is better than the general ChatGPT, is because we are continually reviewing this and making sure that it only shows you the most updated version. And if you say, well, where finally, just to give room some question, where can I find more resources about grade? You can find more. So the grade book is take you back to the grade book, and we have a great book YouTube channel where we will like to provide a more multimedia way to interact. So it's this, we envision this companion, a way to interact with the grade content and to facilitate the getting your questions as you move through the process assessment of the certainty of the evidence. Yes, that will be my short presentation. I'm more than happy to take any question. So the link, yes, I will share the link on absolutely, I will share the link on the chat.
My name is Artur Nowak, and I am CTO at Evidence Prime. And I wanted to share with you some insights, a report from the Global Evidence Summit in the second half of the process, or really the first half of the process, which is the evidence synthesis and systematic reviews. So I can very confidently say that AI was clearly in focus for this year's Global Evidence Summit. It was really difficult to attend all the sessions related to AI in guidelines or evidence synthesis. I believe that many times there were multiple such sessions happening at the same time, and almost all the time there was at least one session with a strong AI or machine learning component included. So just looking through the agenda, we counted at least 15 sessions that mentioned AI in their title, and I believe that we might have even more if we looked at the content. So this clearly shows that this is a very hot topic. We also attended a pre-conference, which was the meeting from the International Collaboration for the Automation of Systematic Reviews, or ICSR. And of course, this was a whole day event dedicated to automation of systematic reviews. So of course, AI was in the focus of this meeting as well. And I think that this volume of content that is on AI just is something remarkable, and something that also reflects the general interest in this topic across media and across all the domains. But what I wanted to highlight, especially in the terms of the Global Evidence Summit, is that many sessions were dedicated to responsible use of AI. And I think that this highlights some transition from last year or the previous years, which points to the fact that people are actually already implementing these solutions, and they already have some positive but also negative experiences with implementing AI. And this triggers these discussions about how to use AI responsibly. So in the part that was more dedicated to the technical meeting, so especially the ICSR meeting, this pre-conference that I mentioned, here we also saw this transition from speaking just about some prototypes to actually discussing how we can tackle engineering problems related to moving these solutions into production, into deployed systems that are used by actual users. So, for instance, our presentation during ICSR focused on these 5 properties that you can see right now on your screens. So things like how to achieve acceptable performance, so how to make these models answer quickly enough, even if we have a high volume of papers and users, and also how to make this cost efficient. Because what we hear very often is that since there are many AI chatbots, many solutions available for free or at a very nominal fee, there is some expectations from users that the tools for evidence synthesis will also be free or very cheap. However, we need to take into consideration that many of these tools that are free are net, let's say, are negative in terms of their profits. I mean that there is a considerable investment into making these tools work, or they are deployed by some very rich companies that treat this as part of their marketing strategy, or also to kind of secure some share of the market. So they are willing to lose money on these systems in order for them to gain popularity. This is, of course, not something that we can afford when building systems in evidence synthesis. So this was one of the topics that was discussed quite a lot. Also, topics like security and compliance, something that I think comes up pretty often during our presentations. This is something that we have in focus, but also the discussions around internal benchmarks. So if you track news related to AI, and perhaps even if you don't track them, you are probably bombarded by a number of announcements related to AI. Like, for instance, we have now the new Llama models from Meta AI, or we had some other models last week. And basically every single day, we have a new model that claims to be state of the art in some benchmarks. And in many cases, this is true. It's across so many benchmarks that exist, it's very likely that some of these models really shine in general, or maybe given their size, so relative to other models of this size, so let's say of this cost. However, it's very important to actually have internal benchmarks, because it may turn out that some of these models are just very good at this particular benchmarks. Something that I think we all kind of understand from our own experience, that students that were best at passing tests are not not always the most knowledgeable, and the same goes also for AI. There are some tricks that large providers of these AI models employ to, for instance, get better at benchmarks that involve human judgment. So, for instance, there is a very widely used benchmark that is called LMSys Arena, where users are asked to interact with two systems and pick the response that they like better. And there are basically two problems here. So the first one is that it was found that responses that are formatted in some way, so that they have more tables, have more punctuation and headings, are preferred. So for some time, we already saw that the new models try to output something that has more formatting, just to get better at these benchmarks. And the second thing is that with these AI models getting more and more capable, it's actually difficult for people to find these differences and to reliably judge whether one model is better than the other. So it's a little bit like with perhaps work of art or literature, that at some point somebody who is not really familiar with a given field may actually have differences telling apart a work that is of very high quality versus something that is of slightly lower quality. So we have all these problems that kind of leads to the necessity of having internal benchmarks. And I think that finally something that we try to highlight in our messaging is that however we apply AI, we always need to keep in mind the so-called user-important outcomes. So we use this term as an analogy to patient-important outcomes that we have in the research. And the idea here is that instead of trying to get 1% more, or maybe 0.1% more on some benchmark, what we really need to care about is helping users, and how all these innovations actually translate to time saved by users in the tool. And this may not be, let's say, correlated in a very simple way. Sometimes the models that are, let's say, more explainable, sometimes models that work better in tandem with people may actually be more efficient than the ones that score better at some benchmark that somebody created perhaps for another purpose. So these are the themes that we explored in the technical, let's say, community. But looking at these terms, themes, I think you can clearly see that we are moving ahead with implementation. The problems that we are discussing right now, the challenges that we tackle, are much more about solving real problems rather than doing something in the lab. And kind of also added to this observation that we have many sessions about using AI responsibly, I think that we are actually at this point where AI is transitioning from some sort of a sci-fi movie into something that we use almost daily. And the AI generated image here is for memory foam, which was initially created for the astronauts, and then used in many commercial products, and now basically perhaps used in most of the homes. And I think that we are kind of getting to this point that something that even 4 or 5 years ago was really space tech to some degree is now becoming a commodity, and now we kind of need to change a little bit our approach, but also this creates different problems than in the beginning. We no longer try to push the boundary of what's possible. Now this is mostly a problem of how to make this economically viable and user-friendly. So I think that that's something that was kind of discussed at length during a debate that I had pleasure of participating. So there was a plenary debate on one of the days of the Global Evidence Summit, which was designed to be a little bit more lighthearted, but with a very provocative question. So whether AI has potential to replace humans in evidence synthesis. So when there was a show of hands at the beginning of the debate, only a handful of people raised their hands. So it was very clear that the audience is very negatively, let's say that they have very low confidence into AI being able to replace humans. So I was on the team that was tasked with arguing that this is indeed possible. We were opposed by the team that you see here on the right that argued the other way. And I just wanted to go through the arguments from both sides, because I think that this may be interesting for you, and perhaps something that we can also discuss during this webinar in the second part. So from my team, from the team that was arguing that at some point AI can replace humans, we were arguing that the efficiency and speed that comes from AI is really necessary. And the same goes for scalability, about the AI systems or computer systems in general being available 24/7. So this all kind of links to the fact that we are constantly tackling information overload. We can also expect that more and more research will be automated. So we'll have wet labs that are operated by robots, and then the synthesis of the results will also be done by AI and then published with a large AI component. So we can expect that this rate of scientific output will actually increase. And we know that we don't keep up with this nowadays. And so to tackle what we have right now and also brace for the future, we'll probably need to have AI at our side. So these arguments were around really the necessity of applying AI, but there was also this other side of the coin. So AI being, let's say, more cost-effective in the long run, the potential that is shown by the tools that we already have makes us optimistic about this future actually being within reach. And also, in terms of the ethical considerations, this may be a little bit surprising, but we found that if now we have this situation that that we have a very long time between new drug being developed and then reaching the patients, and if we have delays in evidence synthesis that kind of contribute to the fact that we are not providing the optimal care to the patients, we can also say that not using automation, not using technology to shorten this time is actually unethical. So these are arguments, or some of the arguments that the team that was arguing for the potential of AI to replace humans used. And then we were also, of course, opposed by the arguments from the other team. So these arguments included the fact that AI is only hype, that it's something that we talk a lot about, but there is really no evidence that it truly works. And all the evidence that we have is really using insufficient metrics, so it's only looking in a very, let's say, broad narrow way at how these AI systems work. Also, the fact that AI is more like a statistical model that can only apply what it has seen, so in the training, so it's not capable of an innovation or looking kind of outside of the box, and that this is different to how humans operate, that are not only using their minds but also their bodies and spirits, and the spirit to make decisions. So in this sense, the opposing team said that AI lacks this particular kind of sensitivity to human problems that enable human researchers to do their job properly. So to being able to feel the community context of everything they do. And they also pointed out to some scientific integrity problems. So for instance, that the current tools already distorted the scientific community in some way. So we have papers that were fully AI generated and very often reviewed and published, but we can very easily see that they were fully generated by AI because there are like some watermarks of ChatGPT in them, like as an AI assistant, I cannot do something. And this is something that you can actually find in the paper. So they pointed out that so far AI is not really making us better researchers, and actually it's the opposite. It presents a very big risk for producing low quality research. The last point that I wanted to that I noted down from these arguments is actually something that I think both teams really agreed on, meaning that what is really needed is a staged and rigorous process to implement AI in evidence synthesis. And maybe that was really the idea from the organizers of this debate by framing this in such a way. I mean, the question that they asked is a little bit open-ended because it says, whether AI has potential to replace. And of course, speaking about potential and speaking about what can happen in 100 years, I think most people will agree that maybe at some point it is possible. It's very difficult to really say that it can never happen. So I think to this degree, the two teams kind of met in the middle, saying that it's not possible right now, but the future possibly looks quite bright in terms of adoption of these AI tools. And this was also partly reflected in the live poll that we had after the debate ended. So we had the attendees vote using using a mobile app. And even if the opposing team won, I mean, we had more votes for AI not being able to replace humans. Actually, it was a very close call. And given this initial show of hands that I told you about, with only a couple of people kind of believing that AI has this potential, we saw a really big increase over the debate. So I think both teams were satisfied. One team won, but the other was able to convince a lot of people that AI actually has this potential. So I think that this was a very fun session, and it was designed to be fun. And I hope that it's also kind of intellectually interesting to you and something that we can discuss in the second part of this webinar. Before we move to the second part, to our discussion, your questions, and also Ignacio's thoughts on this, I wanted to share with you some wonderful news that we received this week. We were accepted. A project that we submitted to European Union was accepted. This project is called Laser LLM. And this is a project of a total budget of more than €5.5 million to work on AI in evidence synthesis over the next 3 years. I hope that my belief in AI being able to move the needle will actually be kind of justified, because now we have funds to really make this reality. So thanks so much. And we'll now be very happy to hear your questions about the presentations before we move on to some, let's say, topics that we wanted to discuss with Ignacio.
Thank you very much, Artur, for that presentation. And then just wanted to jump straight into the questions for Dr. Neumann. Can grade GPT hallucinate?
Yes, it does hallucinate, but we tried to keep it at a minimum. But it's a known problem of GPT in general, and grade GPT can hallucinate. So it's kind of a way to interact with the content, but the content should be reviewed. And we have some also, although we have trained the model to try to answer with updated questions, sometimes it does respond with outdated grade concept. So it's not perfect, and we will kind of improve on that in the future.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. The next question is, as far as I could see, Grade GPT is integrated in ChatGPT. I wonder, if you train Grade GPT, are you not already training ChatGPT as well? And there won't be any need anymore for feeding an own system? Or is it about enhancing the trust of users that behind this information there is the grade group? And if this is the case, then I directly want to refer to the hallucinating question from before. Thank you for all the answers. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, so that is something that we actually don't know, right? Because it's to what extent we are trained the larger model of grade GPT. But so the chat GPT, but when we discuss this, we want grade to be accessible and free for everyone. So if we are not inadvertently trained ChatGPT, that would be fine with us as well. I think a similar discussion was about when the Wikipedia page of grade. So, well, we want to be this accessible to everyone, so we don't mind if people start to posting about grading Wikipedia, but we need to review it to kind of ensure that the content is current and correct. So I think that the added value of Grade GPT, and if we stay in the same platform, because one of the things that we're considering is to migrate to another platform, is to say, well, we are kind of reviewing the output and making sure this as accurate as possible. That is something that we cannot do with the larger model. If by doing that, other model can do the same, we are more than happy that happened, because grade should be accessible and grade to everyone anyways.
Amazing, thank you. What's the data retention storage policy within Grade GPT?
I don't know. Artur, do you know?
Yeah, so I believe it's the same as with ChatGPT, and there is a checkbox. And I don't know if this checkbox is opt-in or opt-out, but you can actually tell them not to store or they store the chat data, right? Because you can go back to your previous conversations, but you can at least ask them not to use them for training. And this may also depend on where you are located. So now this is actually becoming a very hot topic in AI in general, because, for instance, the new Llama models that were released by Meta AI, they are not available in Europe. And the same is true for some of, for instance, ChatGPT capabilities. So, for instance, in ChatGPT, you have something called memory, which is, let's say, something that the models learns about you from your questions and your responses, and then it may ask you to kind of add it to the memory to personalize the responses for you down the road. This is something that is available in US, but it's not available in European Union. So this is a very difficult answer, because there are so many factors here, like your location, like the what consents you send to the tool maker, and so
on. The next question, which relates to another question a little bit further on, is about risk of bias. Can the grade companion help with risk of bias? The next question, a little bit further down, is can humans not train bias into AI models? I think that might be two different questions for both of you.
Yeah, I can do the risk of bias. We have not trained our GPT in assessing risk of bias, and the reason for that is because we don't endorse, or we don't require users to use any specific tool. If you want to, you can do it, but we say, well, what we need, we think we should assess risk of bias. How do you do it? Is a user decision. So we have not trained GPT. At some point, we discussed whether to train it with RAV2 or not, because the Cochrane tool, but we decided that was outside the scope of the grade GPT.
Yeah, and I will be happy to answer the second question about including bias in the training data, or perhaps because, of course, there are some agents that probably would like this to happen by design, but I think that most of the time this happens by accident, that this bias is included. And of course, this is a major issue, especially that it's very difficult to measure. We have some studies that, for instance, look at political biases, gender biases of these models. We know that models trained in different countries by different organizations show different biases that are, let's say, largely correlated by public relations, let's say, of these of these companies and governments. So so I think that these biases are there, but at the same time, this is a very active area of research, and I know that this will sound a little bit maybe scary to some degree, but I believe that it is much easier to, at some point, remove these biases from the models than from humans. And here it's a little bit like with self-driving cars, that we know that people in general get aggressive behind the wheel, and I think that this happens to the best of us, and is perhaps linked to some reptilian part of our brains that sometimes some situations trigger aggression, and we know that this is a major risk factor for car accidents. And I think despite all the training that we that we are doing, it's very difficult to actually remove this from the human drivers. However, with AI, I think that we have a much higher chance of removing all the behavior that we want to remove, because this is like an artificial silicon machine, right? So even if the bias is there, I think it can be removed. It's just a matter of time and a matter of research how to do this.
Moving on to the next question, I think, how is the industry currently monitoring AI use? Thinking about it in terms of ethical considerations, where are we allowed to use AI without issue, and where are there issues? Perhaps, I'm wondering, let me know what you think. Perhaps that is more of a detailed answer question we can go into the discussion section later. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for your questions so far, everyone. Artur, do you want to go through with the next section?
Absolutely. So yeah, please send your questions, and we will answer the two questions that are now in the Q&A module. If you could also kind of clarify what you mean by industry here, so whether whether this is like pharma industry or in the software industry, let's say. So that will also be very helpful when answering this question. So for the final 15 minutes, I wanted to invite you to some sort of discussion, kind of continuing on this Q&A session. So also please feel free to send more questions. And we just thought that maybe it will be helpful if we provide some topics for these questions, kind of beyond the presentations that you've seen. So first, Ignacio, I wanted to ask you, what is your number one AI related insight from the jest? So I think I spent my whole presentation talking about my insights. And the bottom line is that we are kind of moving from the prototype to more mature phase in AI adoption, even if this is still very early. And what's yours?
Thank you, Artur. I think at the summit, there were different presentations about using AI in different stages. I think one of my takes is most people agree that AI may help in lower the burden of doing, for example, evidence synthesis, as even the analysis of data extraction. But I think people were very wary about replacing human judgment. We have actually one presentation that for a colleague of us creating a synthetic panelist. So it was a health economist that provide their opinion in a guideline panel, not a real panel, a synthetic panels. And I think people will very kind of worry about that, because how this judgment will be constructed, how the bias will manage. So I think there is some task that people feel that AI could easily replace or help or enhance actually the work of systematic review teams and guideline panels. And the general kind of feeling that I have was there is some tasks, especially related to judgment, that people prefer not to delegate to AI. That I will say that I think not all the steps of the guideline enterprise could be replaced by AI, I think.
Yes, and I think that this kind of also is a good segue to the second question that I think is very interesting. And I think, part of what was said in this debate that I reported to you about replacement of humans in evidence synthesis is not actually applicable to guidelines, at least in my opinion. I think, kind of working in both fields, I have a very diverging opinion of using AI in both. And I think that evidence synthesis is maybe more analytical and let's say more prone to automation and doing something much more let's say machine operated. But I don't feel the same for guidelines, and I was curious to kind of hear your thoughts and also the attendees' thoughts. Kind of asking a question that is a little bit opposite to what we ask ourselves most of the time. So what do you think should never be done by AI? So what part of guideline development should always stay with humans?
So I think it's interesting. I think a lot of decisions actually are a value judgment. As much as we integrate evidence to inform the decision, by the end of the day, there is a value judgment. Whether will you put more weight on the benefit, whether will you put more weight on the harms, or how important is going to be resource consideration and access consideration in the final decision. And I think it's difficult to think that, at least with the current technology, AI could replace those judgments. And if at some point that technology becomes available, I think it's also difficult to imagine that we will want to delegate that to AI, because it could reassemble like more a dystopian future in which the decisions that is basically about value are no longer made by humans. So I think that the judgment will, at least for the foreseeable future, will remain in human hands, but they can be enhanced by AI. For example, we typically, when we do a guideline development, we do one scenario, one baseline race with one set of value. So maybe AI can help us to say what happened if people value differently this outcome. What happened if we're doing this same decision in a higher baseline risk population? So I think it could enhance and show scenarios to facilitate panel judgments, but I think that will remain in human hands, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's a great take. And one question that we have from the audience, I think that also fits this topic. So the question is, how would the debate have gone if focused on a specific step of the evidence synthesis and guideline development process? So for instance, if AI could replace humans in screening or risk of bias assessment, or with specific types or topics of reviews. So, based on what you said, do you think that because here, when we talk about the debate, we are really talking about what people in the audience thought, right? So do you think that the field, I mean, the crowd that attended Global Evidence Summit would be willing to say that AI can replace humans in very specific step of the process, like, for instance, screening?
Yeah, I think we discussed this because the conference was so AI oriented, but I think there was a general feeling, at least with the people I talked to, is with that the AI can replace human in tasks like, for example, doing a screening of randomized trial. And the reason for that is because randomized trials very well structured. It's kind of a consistent way of reporting. But for example, if you need to go with observation or non-randomized trials, this is a little more, it's not as standard, so maybe it will be difficult to leave AI without supervision or without some sort of validation, at least at this stage. So I think my general thinking, and the people will talk to us, AI could replace humans in tasks that are highly structured, easy to repeat. But if you need to kind of understand better what you're doing, probably we are not there yet. But I'll say that there was some positive feelings about a specific concrete tasks that are relatively easy for human but take too long. Maybe those can be replaced by AI.
Yeah, so, and we now have another question or really remark from the audience that I think still links to the same topic. So just to summarize what's here, that the person asking this question cannot ever imagine AI replacing an overall decision or not having humans reviewing key moments through the process. What happens if something goes wrong in the beginning and the outcome is a result of something that started off wrong? And I think that this is a very good point, and something that I personally, bring up multiple times also in the technical community, because for the AI models to work, or really for humans to work, we need to tell them what we expect from them, right? So this is really about writing a good protocol of the review. And I think that this is also something that is very difficult to replace, because, for instance, or fully replace, because at some point somebody is assigning a budget to a project, and this budget and this project kind of exists in some larger context that AI cannot even access, right? So the same probably goes for deciding which guideline questions to finally address. We have this work of generating guideline questions, but assigning priorities to them, I mean, generating guideline questions using AI, but assigning priorities to these questions is done by people because they understand the context in which the output of this whole project will be used, and the same goes for writing a protocol. People write the protocol, and it's a little bit like a program, right? With AI models, people are now prompting the models. The models can do stuff that was traditionally only available to programmers. I mean, you needed to learn to code to do some stuff that you can now achieve using just a chat model right now with good prompting. But if you are not prompting properly, then you will not get the good results. And I think that this is also true for evidence synthesis. If you cannot specify very precisely how the review should be conducted, then there is no chance of this being automated. I mean, properly. So I think that this is something that this comment touched on, that, you know, if something goes wrong in the beginning of the process and then the whole review kind of derails, maybe it will not derail if the input to the whole process will be correct. I don't know if you agree with this point.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's true.
Great. So I have another question for the 3 minutes that we have left, and this is about the low-hanging fruits and what in guideline development can be automated or should be automated first, because this is really not the same question. And one of and just to provide some context, one of the comments in the chat was asking about dissemination, and you asked for clarification, Ignacio, and the clarification is that kind of whether it's a poster or website or a mobile app. So if I understand correctly, whether AI can suggest which channel to use for dissemination. And also there is a question for how GPT and knowledge graph technology can be integrated. So some ideas about what in guideline development is a low-hanging fruit, but I would really like to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think that if you're dealing with highly structured evidence, like for example, randomized trials, identify those, especially with if you want to do a living guideline. So, well, sometimes what is difficult is to know whether there is a new trial or not. So something that can be done by AI is to say, well, look, this new trial seems to be relevant to your question, and that can be validated by a human. It still needs some work, and over time, I think that is something that will make a lot of impact, because what we are doing, most of the recommendations are not living because it's very difficult to keep the evidence updated. So maybe we'll help with that. I think it will depend. So the question sometimes how easy is to understand what the trials measuring. So probably will depend, but to me, that will be one of the things that we can help, and the impact will be relatively large.
Thanks so much. So we are almost at the end of our time, so I will hand back to Shelby for the closing thoughts. But thank you so much for this discussion.
Thank you, Artur. It's very grateful for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Yes, both the speakers, Artur, Ignacio, thank you very much. And to all the attendees for being here today. We have still many participants here through the end. Kirsty has just left some information in the chat for you down below regarding, the sort of newsletters that you can subscribe to, and just finding our details there. Unfortunately, we were unable to get to some of the questions at the end. However, we will put together a web page where you'll find some answers up on there to the last 3 remaining questions. Thank you very much for the discussion and for continuing the conversation. I think, if anything, let us just carry on with that. Carry on with this conversation. It's not ending here. It's not ending at any conference. And Yeah, let's carry on. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening and day wherever you are in the world.